My name is Elena Vance, and as I sit here in this dim 40-a-night motel room on the rainy outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina, the only thing cutting through the darkness is the relentless, rhythmic glow of my smartphone screen. 400 missed calls. It's a staggering number, isn't it? 400 times my parents tried to reach the daughter they discarded like a piece of broken furniture just 6 hours ago. My thumb hovers over the screen, the cold blue light reflecting in eyes that have seen too much. It's ironic. One moment, you're the invisible pillar of the family, the one who quietly handles the property taxes, the one who mows the lawn, and the one who ensures the pantry is never empty. And the next, you're standing on a damp sidewalk with a single duffel bag and the echo of your mother's voice ringing in your ears, telling you that you're useless. Leave the house tonight, Elena. No warning, no discussion. Maya's daughter needs your room, and your sister is actually contributing to this family. Those were the final words my mother, Linda, spit at me before the heavy oak door slammed shut and the deadbolt clicked into place with a sound of finality I'll never forget. They kicked me out to roll out the red carpet for my sister, Maya, the golden child who supposedly sends $2,000 every month from her glamorous life in Chicago to keep them afloat. My parents worshipped those checks, treating Maya like a savior while I was treated like a squatter in my own childhood home. But there's a secret they didn't know. I wasn't just living there. I was the one holding the walls up. I had been secretly protecting them from a financial storm they were too blind to see. And tonight, the moment I finally raised my hand and stopped being their shield, their carefully constructed illusion didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. The police are at their door right now, sirens painting the neighborhood red and blue, and for the first time in my entire life, I am not going to be the one to save them. Before I reveal the truth behind those $2,000 checks and why I walked out without a word, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful family stories. Your support helps me keep sharing these lessons on boundaries. Drop a comment and let me know your location and the current time. I love hearing from you. Now, let's go back to where it all began. I grew up in a house on Hemlock Drive, a place that smelled of pine needles and the expensive furniture polish my mother, Linda, insisted on using every Saturday morning. Asheville is a beautiful place. The Blue Ridge Mountains loom over the city like silent guardians. But inside our four walls, the atmosphere was dictated by a different set of rules. In the Vance household, roles were assigned early, like characters in a play we never auditioned for. My sister Maya, who is 4 years younger than me, was the fragile star. She was the one who walked into a room and made people smile just by existing. I was the reliable shadow. I was the one who set the table, the one who remembered to water the garden my father, Gary, loved but often forgot to tend to, and the one who did the grocery shopping before the milk carton was even empty. My mother had a simple, devastating philosophy. Maya was fragile and needed protection. Elena was strong and could handle it. I remember being 12 years old, the summer Maya decided she wanted to be a ballerina. My parents spent thousands on lessons, costumes, and specialized shoes. That same summer, I wanted to take a coding class at the community center. My father looked at the invoice, then looked at me and said those words that became the anthem of my life. Elena, you're smart enough to figure it out on your own. We need to focus on Maya right now. She's at a sensitive age. I didn't argue. I went to the library, checked out every book on programming I could find, and taught myself. I figured it out, just like they knew I would. In my family, competence wasn't rewarded with praise. It was rewarded with more work and less attention. As we grew older, the gap only widened. Maya moved to Chicago after high school, chasing a glamorous career in marketing that mostly seemed to involve expensive brunches and designer handbags. My parents were so proud they practically turned her old bedroom into a shrine. Meanwhile, I stayed in Asheville. I worked a steady job as a senior property manager, and when my father retired from the postal service with a bad back, I was the one who showed up every weekend to fix the leaky faucets and reconcile their bank statements. My dad is a quiet man, present at the dinner table but absent from every conversation that matters. He'd watch me struggle with a heavy ladder or spend hours on the phone with their insurance company, and he'd just nod and say, Good job, Tiff. I mean, Elena. He called me by my sister's name more often than I'd like to admit. I realized then that strong was just the word my family used for expendable. Because I didn't cry when things got hard, they assumed I didn't feel the weight. Because I didn't manufacture a crisis every Tuesday, they assumed my life was perfect. I was the load-bearing wall of the Vance family, and like most load-bearing walls, I was completely invisible until someone wanted to tear me down. I remember one specific evening, about 3 years ago. I had just landed a major promotion at work, a role I'd spent 6 years of late nights and missed weekends to earn. I called home, my voice shaking with excitement. "Mom, I got the senior director position." There was a pause on the other end. Then my mother said, "That's great, honey. Listen, Maya just had a huge fight with her boyfriend and she's absolutely devastated. Can I call you back?" She never did. That was the moment I stopped sharing my wins. I realized that my success gave my mother nothing to fix, and if she couldn't fix it, she wasn't interested in it. She needed Maya's chaos to feel essential. She needed the drama to feel like a mother. My stability was an inconvenience to her narrative, so I went back to being the silent protector. I started noticing things, little red flags in their finances, a mounting debt they were hiding from each other, and a shady investment opportunity my father was being pressured into by an old friend. While they were busy worshiping the ground Maya walked on, I was quietly building a digital fortress to keep them from losing the roof over their heads. I didn't do it for the thanks. I did it because that's what the reliable daughter does. But even a load-bearing wall has a limit, and mine was about to be tested in the most brutal way possible. The change didn't happen overnight. It arrived in thin, white envelopes once a month, postmarked from Chicago. I remember the first time a check arrived. We were sitting in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd spent countless hours scrubbing the grease off the stovetop, when my mother, Linda, tore open the mail with a gasp that sounded like she'd just won the lottery. $2,000, she shouted, her voice hitting a pitch I hadn't heard in years. "Gary, look, Maya sent us $2,000 to help with the mortgage." My father, who usually kept his eyes glued to the evening news, actually stood up. He took the check, held it under the light as if it were a holy relic, and whispered, "That girl, she's finally making something of herself. She hasn't forgotten her old man." From that day forward, the $2,000 check became the centerpiece of our family's existence. It wasn't just money, it was a certificate of Maya's superiority. Every time it arrived, my parents treated it like a royal visitation. Linda would buy expensive ribeye steaks for dinner that night, and Gary would open a bottle of wine he couldn't afford. They would spend the entire meal talking about Maya's high-flying life in the city, her important meetings, and her generosity. I sat there, cutting my steak in silence, listening to them worship a daughter who hadn't visited in 3 years, while I was the one who had literally just finished paying the electric bill with my own overtime pay. The contrast was staggering, yet invisible to them. I was the one who woke up at 5 a.m. to ensure the house was running. I was the one who noticed when the roof started leaking after a heavy Asheville storm and called the contractors, negotiating the price down because I knew our family savings were thin. I paid for the groceries in cash, I filled the cars with gas, and I handled the property taxes that had been creeping up every year. But in my mother's eyes, my contributions were just maintenance. They were expected. They were part of the scenery. But Maya's $2,000, that was a miracle. "You should learn from your sister, Elena," Linda said one evening, waving the latest check in my face. "She's out there conquering the world, and she still has the heart to take care of her parents. What are you doing? Just floating along in a middle management job?" Her words felt like a physical blow, a sharp twist in the gut. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to scream that Maya's money was barely a fraction of what I put into this house every month in labor and hidden costs. I wanted to show her the spreadsheets I kept on my laptop, the ones that showed exactly how I was balancing their debt. But I didn't. I held my tongue because I knew the script of this family. Maya was the hero, and I was the help. But then, I started noticing the cracks in Maya's miracle. It happened on a rainy Tuesday when a letter arrived for Maya at our house. It was from a collection agency, but the name on the return address was a law firm I recognized from my work in property management. Curiosity, mixed with a growing sense of dread, made me open it. Inside wasn't a thank you note for a successful marketing campaign. It was a formal warning about a fraudulent transaction linked to a business account Maya had been associated with. My heart hammered against my ribs. I spent the next 4 hours digging through online public records and legal databases. What I found was a spider web of shell companies and investment schemes that Maya had been fronting for a group in Chicago. The $2,000 she was sending every month? It wasn't marketing commission. It was a calculated move to move money through my parents' bank account, using them as a buffer for transactions that were becoming increasingly legal gray. She wasn't saving the house. She was using it as a shield for her own financial mess. I looked at the check sitting on the kitchen counter, and for the first time, it didn't look like a blessing. It looked like a ticking time bomb. I had two choices. I could expose her right then and watch my parents' hearts break, or I could do what I'd always done. I could protect them. I chose the latter. I quietly contacted a lawyer friend, began setting up a separate escrow account to cover the inevitable legal fallout, and started siphoning my own savings to pay off the debts Maya was creating in their name. I was working a second job remotely at night, eyes burning from the screen, just to ensure that when the miracle finally ended, my parents wouldn't be left on the street. I was their secret protector, their invisible shield, and I did it all while they looked me in the eye and told me I was unambitious compared to their golden daughter. The storm didn't start with a roar. It started with a whisper, specifically a late-night phone call from Chicago that lasted 3 hours. I was in my room, my sanctuary, finishing a property audit for work, when I heard my mother's high-pitched laughter through the vents, followed by a sob that sounded more performative than painful. The next morning, the air in the kitchen felt different. It was thick with a kind of excitement that usually didn't belong to me. My mother, Linda, was already at the stove, making blueberry pancakes, Maya's favorite. My father, Gary, was sitting at the table, actually looking away from his newspaper, his eyes fixed on the empty chair next to him. "Elena, sit down," my mother said, her voice trembling with an artificial sweetness. "We have wonderful news. Maya is coming home." I pulled out a chair, my stomach tightening. "Home? For a visit?" "No," my father chimed in, finally looking at me, though his gaze was flat. "She's moving back. Things have been difficult in Chicago. Her business faced some unfair legal hurdles, and she's stressed. She needs her family. She needs to heal." I knew what those legal hurdles were, but I remained silent. I thought about the $2,000 checks that had suddenly stopped arriving 2 weeks ago, a detail my parents conveniently ignored. "That's a big move," I said carefully. "Where is she going to stay? The guest room is full of Dad's old gym equipment." My mother set the spatula down with a sharp clack. She turned to face me, her hands on her hips. "The guest room is too small, Elena. Maya is bringing her daughter, Lily. They need space. They need a proper environment." She paused, and then she said it, as casually as if she were asking me to pass the salt. "We've decided that they will take your room. It's the largest. It has the best light. And frankly, it's the only one that feels like a real bedroom." I felt the blood drain from my face. My room. The room where I had built my career, where I had spent years of quiet nights working extra shifts to keep this house from being foreclosed. The only space in this world that was truly mine. "And where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The basement is finished," my father said, looking back at his paper. "It's private. You're always working anyway. You won't even notice the difference." "The basement is damp, Dad. It smells like mildew and there's no windows," I argued, the frustration finally bubbling up. "I pay for the groceries. I handle the taxes. I fixed the water heater last month. I am a 30-year-old woman and you want to move me to a cellar so Maya can have my bed?" That was the moment the mask slipped. My mother walked over to the table and leaned in close, her eyes narrowing into slits. Let's be honest for once, Elena. You're only here because we let you stay. You've lived here your whole life, coasting along while your sister was out there in the real world, making something of herself. She sent us $2,000 a month. She supported us when we needed it most. What have you done? You buy some bread and milk? You call a repairman? You're a babysitter for this house, nothing more. I am the reason you still have this house, I snapped back, my voice cracking. Don't you dare lie to me, Linda screamed, her face reddening. Maya is a success. She is a mother. She is a provider. You're just useless. You take up space. You bring no joy to this family. You're just a shadow that lingers in the corners. Maya's daughter needs a home, a real home. If you can't handle being in the basement, then maybe you shouldn't be here at all. I looked at my father. Dad, are you going to say anything? Gary Vance did what he always did. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and stared at a spot on the kitchen tile. Your mother is right, Elena. Your sister has been very generous to us. We owe it to her to make her comfortable. You're strong. You'll figure it out. You always do. The betrayal was a physical weight in my chest. You're strong. You'll figure it out. The anthem of my life, used once again to justify my sacrifice. I looked around the kitchen, the walls I had painted, the floor I had scrubbed, the parents I had protected from the legal nightmare Maya had actually created. They were looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance, as if my presence was a bill they were tired of paying. I've spent 15 years being your shield, I said, my voice now deathly calm. I have handled the debts she piled on you. I have paid the property taxes through a lawyer, so you wouldn't even know how close you were to losing everything. I am the only reason the bank hasn't knocked on that door. My mother laughed, a cold, jagged sound. Oh, listen to her, the big hero. You're delusional, Elena. Maya's money paid for our life. Your little contributions are nothing compared to her heart. Pack your things. Lily and Maya arrive on Tuesday. I want that room empty and scrubbed by Sunday night. Not another word. She turned back to her pancakes, humming that same tuneless melody. My father didn't look up. I stood there, a stranger in my own home, realizing that the walls I had spent my life supporting were never meant to shelter me. They were only meant to shelter the golden child, and I was just the invisible foundation they were ready to crack. I walked out of the kitchen, the word useless echoing in my mind, and for the first time in 30 years, I stopped caring if the house fell down. The silence that followed my mother's final command wasn't peaceful, it was suffocating. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears after a bomb goes off. I stood in the hallway of the house on Hemlock Drive, the place where I'd spent 30 years of my life, and realized that I was looking at it for the last time as a daughter. To Linda and Gary, I was no longer a person. I was an obstacle. I was a tenant who had outlived her usefulness. I walked up the stairs, my feet feeling like lead against the hardwood I had polished just 3 days prior. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to whisper that word my mother had spat at me. Useless. 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 I entered my bedroom, the largest room, the one with the best light, the one my sister's child now deserved more than I did. I didn't turn on the overhead light. Instead, I stood in the dim glow of my bedside lamp and looked around. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't have the energy for a tantrum. When you've been the reliable one for 3 decades, you lose the ability to make a scene. You only know how to make a plan. I pulled out a gray duffel bag from the back of my closet, the same bag I'd used in college. It felt fitting. I was starting over exactly where I had begun, with nothing but my own 2 hands. Packing was a surgical process. I didn't take the furniture I'd bought with my own money, or the curtains I'd sewn to match the walls. I took the essentials, my laptop, my work files, 3 changes of clothes, and the small fireproof safe I kept under my bed. That safe contained the real history of this family, the receipts for the property taxes I'd paid, the legal documents protecting the house from Maya's Chicago creditors, and my father's old pocket watch that he'd given me when I graduated, promising he'd always be proud. I wondered if he even remembered that promise as he sat downstairs, staring at the floor. The bag weighed exactly 11 pounds. I know because the strap dug into my shoulder with a precision that felt like a bruise. As I walked out of my room, I saw the empty space on the bookshelf where my mother had already moved my college trophies to make room for Maya's daughter's dolls. It was as if I was being erased before I had even left the building. I descended the stairs for the last time. My mother was back in the kitchen, humming that same tuneless melody as she wiped the counter, already mentally rearranging my life out of her house. My father, Gary, was standing by the coat closet. He was a man who could diagnose a leaking pipe in the dark, but he couldn't find the words to tell his daughter she mattered. I watched the shadow of his shoes shift under the hallway light. He raised a hand, as if he were going to touch my shoulder or say, "Wait," but then he let it drop. He chose the easier path. He chose the silence. He chose to let the strong daughter handle the fall so the fragile daughter could have the bed. I walked to the kitchen counter and placed my house key on the granite surface. The metal clinked against the stone, a small, sharp sound that felt like a final period at the end of a long, exhausting sentence. "I'm leaving," I said. My voice was steady, deathly calm. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of my tears. Linda didn't even turn around. "Make sure the door locks behind you," she said, her voice clipped and efficient. "And don't forget to take your mail. I don't want to be responsible for your things anymore." I walked out the front door and onto the porch. The Asheville night air was crisp, smelling of damp pine needles and the faint wood smoke from a neighbor's fireplace. I stood there for a moment, the cold wind biting through my thin sweater. I heard the heavy oak door close behind me. Then came the sound, the rhythmic, mechanical click of the deadbolt sliding into place. It was a sound I'd heard thousands of times, but tonight it meant something different. It was the sound of a chapter closing. It was the sound of the foundation I had spent 15 years supporting finally crumbling away. I walked down the driveway, past the oak tree I used to climb as a child, past the garden my father loved, but I was the one who weeded. I didn't look back. I reached the sidewalk, my single duffel bag clutched in my hand, and stood under the yellow glow of the street lamp. Behind me, the house was bright, filled with the warmth of a family that had just cut me out like a tumor. Ahead of me was the dark, rainy road and a cheap motel room. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally cleared the useless daughter out of the way. But as I reached into my pocket and felt the glow of my phone, I knew something they didn't. I was no longer their shield, and without a shield, the storm I had been holding back was about to hit them with everything it had. The Budget Inn on the edge of Asheville smells like stale cigarette smoke, and that industrial-grade lemon bleach they use to hide 1,000 different stories of desperation. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, the springs groaning under my weight, and watched the rain streak down the window pane. For 30 years, I was the one who kept the windows clean, the lawn mowed, and the spirits high. Now, I was just a ghost in a $40 a night room. I opened my laptop. The screen's glow, the only honest thing in the room. My mother's voice was still echoing in my head. "You're useless. You take up space." I looked at the digital folder on my desktop, the one labeled Family Logistics. It was time to show the world and myself what useless really looked like. You see, my parents, Linda and Gary, lived in a world of beautiful illusions. They saw $2,000 checks from Chicago and thought they were being rewarded for raising a star. What they didn't see were the letters from the Buncombe County Tax Office that I intercepted for 3 years. They didn't see the final notice from the bank regarding a predatory loan my father had taken out 5 years ago to cover one of Maya's business emergencies. I was a property manager by trade. I knew how to navigate the labyrinth of debt and legal fine print. While my parents were busy bragging about Maya's designer bags at church, I was quietly siphoning my own salary into a secret escrow account. I had a deal with a local attorney, Mr. Henderson, a man who knew my father from the post office and felt sorry for the mess Gary was making. Every month, for 60 months, I paid the interest on that secret debt. I paid the property taxes. I kept the house in a legal stasis so my parents wouldn't wake up one morning to a sheriff's deputy standing on their porch with an eviction notice. I was their invisible shield, and I never asked for a thank you. I thought that's what love was. I thought being strong meant absorbing the hits so they wouldn't have to feel the sting. But then, I dug deeper into the source of Maya's generosity. About 8 months ago, I noticed the $2,000 checks weren't coming from Maya's personal account. They were coming from a shell company registered in Illinois called Gold Coast Marketing. My professional instincts screamed at me. I spent my lunch breaks at work running background checks and tracking corporate filings. I found a pattern of money laundering, petty, clumsy, but dangerous, linked to a group of investors who were using my sister as a front. Maya wasn't a marketing genius. She was a mule. She was washing illegal funds by sending them through my parents' bank account, making it look like family support. She was using our childhood home, the house I had spent my life protecting, as a buffer for a criminal enterprise. And my parents? They were so blinded by the sparkle of those checks that they practically polished the floor for the person who was setting their house on fire. I sat in that motel room, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I felt the weight of the last 15 years, the science fairs they missed, the graduation they left early, the promotion they ignored, and finally, the deadbolt clicking shut tonight. They wanted me to be useless? Fine. I would give them exactly what they asked for. I would stop being the load-bearing wall. The trigger was a simple email. I had been holding a draft for months, a detailed report of the financial irregularities I'd discovered, addressed to the Asheville PD's fraud division and the bank's legal department. I had protected Maya because she was my sister. I had protected my parents because I thought they were victims. But as I looked at the 400 missed calls, none of which were apologies, all of which were likely demands to find Lily's stuffed animal or fix the Wi-Fi for Maya's daughter, I realized you cannot save people who are determined to drown you to keep themselves dry. I clicked on the automated payment system for the escrow account. Delete recurring payment. Confirm. Click. Just like that, the $1,500 interest payment that was due by midnight was gone. Without that payment, the predatory loan would default instantly. The bank would be notified. The protection I had built around the house evaporated in a single millisecond. Then I turned to the email. I attached the screenshots of the Gold Coast marketing filings, the bank statements showing the suspicious $2,000 transfers, and the evidence of how my parents' account was being used as a conduit. I didn't do it out of revenge. I did it out of truth. I raised my hand and signaled the storm. I hit send. The silence that followed was heavy. I closed the laptop and leaned back against the thin, flat pillow. For the first time in my life, I didn't have a plan to save anyone but myself. I thought about the house on Hemlock Drive. Right now, Maya was probably sitting in my bed, laughing with my mother about how they finally cleared the clutter by kicking me out. They were celebrating their victory in a house that, legally and financially, had just lost its only foundation. The clock on the bedside table ticked. 10:15 p.m. The police would be there soon. The bank's automated system would trigger the foreclosure process by morning. The miracle sister was about to be revealed as the source of their ruin, and the useless daughter was nowhere to be found. I turned off the bedside lamp. The motel room went dark, but the 400 missed calls kept the phone glowing like a dying star. I didn't answer. I didn't even look. I just closed my eyes and let the rain take over. The phone didn't just ring, it screamed. It was a frantic, vibrating mess on the nightstand of my motel room, the screen constantly lighting up with my mother's name, then my father's, then Maya's. Back and forth, a relentless cycle of digital desperation. I sat in the darkness, the only sound the rhythmic thumping of the phone against the wood and the distant hum of the ice machine outside. I didn't need to pick up to know what was happening at 14 Hemlock Drive. I could visualize it with terrifying clarity. the red and blue lights of the Asheville PD cruisers reflecting off the harbor blue fence my father was so proud of, the heavy boots on the porch I had swept, and the sound of the law finally catching up with the golden child. The messages started pouring in like a broken dam. The first few were angry. "Elena, why did you change the Wi-Fi password? Where are the grocery store coupons?" Then they shifted to confusion. "Elena, the bank just called saying our account is locked. What did you do?" And finally, the terror set in. A voicemail from my mother, her voice high and jagged with a panic I had never heard. Elena, pick up. There are police here. They're asking about Maya's checks. They're saying something about money laundering and bank fraud. They're saying the house is under investigation. Elena, help us. You're the one who handles the paperwork. Tell them it's a mistake." I listened to it twice. Tell them it's a mistake. For 15 years, I had been the one fixing their mistakes, smoothing over the cracks and absorbing the blows so they could live in their fragile, expensive bubble. But Maya hadn't just made a mistake. She had made a choice. She had chosen to use our parents' names and their modest home as a laundromat for her Chicago investors, and she had done it knowing they would never look a gift horse in the mouth. She knew my mother worshipped those $2,000 checks too much to ever ask where they came from. My father's voice came next in a text that made my hands shake. "Elena, they're taking Maya. They're saying she's been using our account to move illegal funds. The bank has started foreclosure proceedings because the interest payments stopped. I don't understand. You said the house was safe. Elena, please. You're the only one who knows how to talk to these people. Where are you? Where are you?" Now they wanted to know where the useless daughter was. Now they needed the shadow that lingered in the corners. They didn't want the star. They wanted the shield. I could almost see Maya, the fragile sister, sitting on the sofa in my old room, her face pale, her marketing genius persona crumbling as she realized that her shield, her invisible, reliable sister, had finally raised her hand and stepped aside. She had walked into that house claiming my bed and my dignity, and in return, she had brought the roof down on everyone's head. The phone buzzed again. Call number 382. Then 383. Then 384. They were calling me as if the sheer volume of their need could force me to become their protector again. But the protection was gone. I had spent my life building a fortress around people who didn't even know I was the architect, and tonight I had simply stopped holding the walls up. As the police were likely escorting Maya to a cruiser and the bank was marking their home as an asset to be seized, the irony was thick enough to choke on. They had kicked me out to make room for Maya's family, only for Maya to be the reason they would all be on the street by morning. I wasn't the one who ruined them. I was just the one who stopped preventing them from ruining themselves. I lay back on the thin motel mattress, closed my eyes, and let the 400th call go to voicemail. For the first time in my life, the silence was louder than their demands. I watched the sun rise over the Blue Ridge Mountains from the small, cracked window of my motel room. The 401st call never came. Silence had finally taken over. My parents were likely at the police station now, trying to explain away a decade of Maya's lies, while the bank officially began the process of taking back the house I had saved 100 times over. People often say blood is thicker than water, but they forget that blood can also drown you if you let it. I chose to step out of the current. I didn't lose a family that night. I finally lost a burden. I realized that being strong isn't about how much you can carry for others. It's about having the courage to know when to put the weight down. If you've ever been the invisible one, the one who keeps the lights on while everyone else takes the credit, this story is for you. You are enough. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our community. Share your own stories of setting boundaries in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for listening. My name is Elena Vance, and for the first time in my life, I am finally free. I am walking into my new life, starting right now.